Stanford University.
Welcome to lecture number 16 of Stanford CS 193P, fall of 2017-18. We have one topic today, but it's a big one, lots of different parts of it, which is segues. This is the last important thing you need to know structurally to be able to build complicated apps. So we're going to dive right into the first one here, which is modal segues. You actually already know about modal view controllers because in our emoji art view and in your homework, you actually presented your document view modally, okay? So a modal view controller is one that takes over the whole screen. Usually it slides up from the bottom, though not always. And here I have an example of some sort of contacts keeping app. And it's got a little plus button in the upper right. And when I press that, it modally segues to or modally presents another view controller. This is a completely different view controller. This is not a navigation controller. There's no back button. Instead, you can see there's a cancel button there. And I can have presented this view controller and then present another view controller if I want. For example, this little add photo button in this new contact MVC, if you press it, it presents another modal view controller on top of the other one. Again, no back button. This is not a navigation controller. We are just presenting these things modally. We call it modally because the app is now in a mode, essentially, where it can only do this MVC, okay? So we get out of this, of course, by having to dismiss these view controllers, just like we did with our document in emoji art. So I'm going to cancel this one. Goes back to the previous one. I cancel this one. It's going to go back to its previous one, and we're back to where we started here. Okay, so that's it. Modal view controller is very simple. Now, I wait to tell you about modal view controllers until really the end of the quarter because this is really not the primary way you want to be putting view controllers up. Okay, navigation controllers and split view controllers are a much better way to interact with the user. It's because of this mode business. So you don't really want to put your users in a situation where they can only do what you're telling them to do. They like the flexibility to navigate around, change their mind, go somewhere else. And they can't do that if you put them in this mode. All they can do is cancel it to get back to that world. So I generally recommend thinking of another way to put an MVC up first before you resort to modal. Okay? So how do we set up a modal segue? Exactly the same as all our other segues. We just control drag. Of course, we can present it from code as well with perform segue with identifier. And we even learned in last lecture there how to present a view controller not with a segue in a modal fashion, which is the present method in view controller. Okay, that's how we got our emoji art document on screen when it was chosen. And so you know all of that. Modal segues and modal presentation is kind of like the basic segue. Again, I'm only telling you it last because you don't want to use it as your first resort. But there's nothing simpler when it comes to this kind of thing. And so preparing for a modal segue is, again, exactly what you're used to. Nothing special whatsoever. And one interesting thing about modal is how do I hear back from a modal segue to MVC? You know, I put that contacts thing, I added a contact. How do I get the contact that I want to add back, okay, to my contacts app? And really, things fall into two categories there for the most part. One is you don't need to give anything back. So like in the contacts app, maybe that new contacts MVC just puts it in a database, and then you just dismiss that thing. And when you come back to the other one, it's just going to be showing it because it's watching the database. In other words, they're sharing a model, for example. But there is the case where you actually have to communicate back. So let's say we didn't have that sort of design and our add contact thing actually wants to give us a contact back. In that sense, you want to think about those modally presented view controllers like the add contacts MVC as part of the view of the previous one. Just like in a navigation controller, when we go to the next card on the stack, we think of that as part of our view. Kind of want to think of the same thing here. So that thing you present can't really talk back to the thing that presented it. Okay? Really, the thing that presented it needs to talk to it. And we have a mechanism for doing that. It's called an Unwind Segue, which I'm going to talk about at the end of today's lecture. And that's really how we would communicate things back and still keep MVC intact there. And how do we dismiss a view controller? Again, you've already learned this because we dismissed our document view controller. Use this method dismiss, but I kind of misled you in our demo last time, and I'm going to straighten that out. And I kind of did it intentionally so that you would see this change that I'm going to make today and realize, oh, I see. And what I misled you about is that it is really the presenting view controller's responsibility to dismiss, not the presented. And you notice that in our Emoji Art app, we had our close button just say dismiss. In other words, it sent dismiss to the Emoji Art document saying dismiss yourself, okay? That's really not the right way to do that. Now, it works because the dismiss method will automatically forward that to its presenting view controller if you've been presented. But the reason we don't like to rely on that, that's probably in there for some sort of historical reason, but the reason we don't want to rely on it is because if we have the line dismiss inside of our code somewhere in a view controller, it usually means we're going to dismiss something we presented because we're the presenting view controller, okay? So to make that clear, when we're dismissing ourselves, we probably want to send that to our presenting view controller. And there's a var in UI view controller called presenting view controller that if you've been presented, it will not be nil, and you can send it dismiss, and that will dismiss yourself. So we're going to go back to our demo today, and I'm going to change our call to dismiss to say presenting view controller, optional chain, dot dismiss. Okay? Just to make it clear that really we should be asking our present. It's not necessarily wrong to dismiss ourselves like that, but it's confusing because we're not sure whether that dismiss means to dismiss something I presented or dismiss myself. So, you know, we're just trying to clear that up. Yeah, so like I say, for convenience, it's forwarded, but we don't rely on it. Now, another thing, of course, is this unwind segue I alluded to where you got to communicate information back. That automatically dismisses. So that's another way to dismiss, and we'll see that when we talk about unwind towards the end here. You can also control the presentation of the view controller a little bit with the modal presentation style var in view controller. And this only can have a little bit of control. For example, the default is dot full screen, the modal presentation style dot full screen. That means slide up from the bottom and cover the whole screen. That's what you've been seeing so far. That's the default. There's also over full screen, which is interesting. That does the same thing except for it lets the view controller that it's covering up shine through, so that if you're presenting a view controller that has a clear background, it'll show through. Now, we don't usually do that, okay, slide something up with a clear background. However, sometimes we will slide something up with a blurred background. And I'm not going to really talk about visual effects. Look at UI visual effects if you want to learn more about it. But you can make it so that you have a nice blurred background, and that would be the time we would use over full screen. On iPad, sometimes doing the full screen approach is just too much white space, okay? The screen is so big that it's just way big, too much white space. So there's a couple of ways to have on iPad a little smaller area come up and have your view controller in it. One is called Page Sheet, which kind of does something the size of a piece of paper, looks to be a piece of paper, and then Form Sheet, which is even a smaller little white thing. And when these things show up, the rest of the UI is grayed out. Okay, it's kind of grayed out and also completely inaccessible. Can't touch on it, can't interact with it, whatever. In horizontally compact environments like iPhone, right, or iPhone Plus in portrait only, the iOS will automatically adapt Form Sheet and Page Sheet styles to be full screen because there's just not enough room to show a Form Sheet or a Page Sheet on an iPhone and still have the gray area around. Everything would be jammed too small. So it'll automatically adapt for you. How about the animation of the thing appearing on screen? Okay, well, by default, it slides up from the bottom. That's called cover vertical. But it also has flip horizontal, where you can flip it over. Another one is cross dissolve. And finally, there's partial curl, which looks like a piece of paper flipping up off the bottom, which is kind of cool. That one only works with full screen modal. It doesn't work with the Page Sheet or Form Sheet. It doesn't make sense. You can't really fold it up from the bottom when you're kind of got the excess area around the edges. So we don't really tend to use those other ones that much. You know, you want to be careful not to have your UI be too tricky. Okay, you want it to kind of feel like other UIs, so we tend to leave that one cover vertical most of the time. Both of these styles, the presentation style and the transition style, can be set in the storyboard. You just inspect the segue that you created by control dragging, and in the inspector there you can set these things. All right, so we're going to do a demo here. We're going to go back to Emoji Art, and what we're going to do is add an inspector. You know how you have the inspector in Xcode? Well, we're going to have an inspector of our emoji art documents, and what it's going to tell us about our emoji art documents is the size in bytes and when it was created. Okay, so it's a simple inspector. This is a demo after all. I'll probably throw the thumbnail image into the inspector as well, just so I can show you a little bit what we can do with constraints in code, because I have a little more to show you about constraints. So let's hop on over here. Here is emoji art, exactly as we left it last time. This is our emoji art document view controller here, emoji art view controller. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little button right here. I'm going to call it inspect, I guess. And when you click this button, it's going to bring a whole new view controller up modally, okay, that inspects this document that we're looking at. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that new view controller. And just to review, we create a new view controller just by dragging it out. Okay, so here I put a new view controller in here. Of course, every view controller needs its own view controller subclass to control it. So I'm going to go new file here. We're creating a Cocoa Touch class. It's a subclass of UI view controller. I'm going to call it my document info view controller. All right, put it the same place we put all our other files there. Here it is. I'm going to make sure that I don't forget to go back here and inspect with the identity inspector up here and change it to be a document info view controller. Otherwise, I won't be able to wire up my outlets and actions and all that business. Let's go ahead and add this info button that modally segues to that. So I'm going to search for button here. And of course, I'm going to use a bar button item because I'm putting it in my bar up here. I don't think there's any predefined button type for inspect or info, so I'm going to use a custom button this time. When the title, I'm going to have it be inspect. And then I'm just going to control drag. This is how you create a modal segue. Just control drag, and instead of picking show or show detail, which is navigation controller and split view controller, we're going to do present modally. Okay, and that creates this little segue right here. We can look at it. Of course, we're going to want to prepare this MVC, so we will need an identifier. I'm going to call this segue under identifier show document info, because that's what it does right there. And you can see that it's present modally. Here's where I was talking about you can change how it presents, page sheet, form sheet, and also how it animates on screen, right? I'm just inspecting this little guy right here. So now I need to build my UI here for my document info. So I'm going to have some labels here, of course, for the size and the creation date. So I'm going to bring that out. Actually, I'm going to create 4 of these, 4 labels. And let's zoom in so you can see this a lot better. Right, here's my 4 labels. So I'm going to have one label is just going to be size, and the other one's going to be created. And then this is going to be the actual size, which I'll have it be 99 bytes, so we can tell when it's successfully showing the actual size. And then the creation date, we'll say today's date, because we know we created a lot of our documents earlier. So this is the 15th, 17, and it's what, about 4:45 p.m., something like that. Okay, so these two we're going to set from information in our document, obviously. Let's use stack views to line all this stuff up. So I'm going to hit these two into a stack view, and they're alignment trailing, which is exactly what I want. And these right here, I'm going to put in a stack view, and they're alignment leading, which is exactly what I want. Then I'm going to take the 2 of these and put them in a stack view with some standard spacing between. Okay, now I have a nice little space to show my size and created here. One other thing I'm going to add is an image view. And I'm mostly adding this because I want to show you something about constraints. So here's an image view. This is a little big. I'll try to pick a size that kind of works for this text that I have down here. Let's go ahead and put that in stack view. And we'll put a standard spacing in there as well. And we'll have the alignment here be centered because we don't want that to necessarily have to be the exact same width. Now notice it's red here. Okay, we've got red up here because it says horizontal ambiguous settings here. And this is because the image view, if you'll remember, has an intrinsic size. It depends on the image in there and all that. So I'm going to do a couple of things here. One, I don't want this image view to actually get much wider than this. I wouldn't want it to be like really, really wide and make this text feel really small. So I'm going to fix the width of this actually right here. To whatever it is fine. And then also now it's worried about the height, so I'm going to also fix the aspect ratio. However, with this aspect ratio, I'm going to set it from code. okay, because I want the aspect ratio of this image, which is going to be my thumbnail of my document, to be the right aspect ratio for my image. So we'll do that little constraint in code exercise in a little bit here. So I'm going to take this and center it in the middle. So let's go ahead and have it centered vertically in the place here. And that eliminated all of my auto layout warnings. And this is what it looks like now. Okay, looks a little lonely here in this big white space, but it is what it is. And now let's go ahead and create some outlets to these things so we can set this stuff. So I'm going to go over here, go to my document info view controller. Here it is. Let's get rid of all the free stuff it gave us. And let's start wiring these things up. So I'll zoom in again so you can see it. Let's wire up this image view. That's going to be where my thumbnail goes. So I'm going to call this my thumbnail image view. And then this little label right here, that's where my size goes. So I'm going to put over here and call this my size label. And this one right here is where my creation date stuff goes. So I'm going to call that my created label. Okay, so I've created a nice little guy here to do some UI, and I've wired him up to info. Let's go ahead and run what we got so far here just to see what it does, even though, of course, we don't actually set any of these values, but we can at least just make sure that our UI is looking similar to what we want. Okay, here we are, emoji art. Let's bring up Applebee's. There we go, apples and bees. And here's our inspect button up here. Now watch, I'm going to click this. Okay, slides up from the bottom. We see 99 bytes and today's date because we haven't done anything there. And of course, there's no thumbnail image. And we got a big problem here. Yikes, I can't get back to my app, right? Because I presented this modally, it took over. Now it's my responsibility to provide some UI to get the heck out of here. So let's go do that. I'm going to do that really simply by adding a button. So I'm going to go over here, get a button. Oops, button. There it is. So we'll drag this button in here. I'm just going to put it at the bottom here, and I'm going to call this button Return to Document. And we'll just control drag from here, and we'll call this Done, because we're done with this thing, and it's going to be an action, and we don't need any arguments to it or whatever. So there's our nice Done. And what are we going to do in our Done? Well, we want to dismiss ourselves, but now here's where we're going to remember that, oh, we could just say dismiss. Okay, and that works because of that automatic forwarding, but really what we want to do is ask our presenting view controller, if we have one, to please dismiss us. Okay, and it's animated true. Okay, and it has a completion handler. We're not going to use that, whatever, so it's going to dismiss us. So let's take a look at this, make sure this is actually dismissing us. Okay, here we go. Up here, let's inspect. We have returned to document. Woohoo, we're back. Okay, so that's good. Now we have a model that this MVC has no model, so we have a model to add here so that it can actually show the document. Actually, before that, let's go back and add this presenting view controller treatment to our emoji art view controller, just so you can see where that was. So let's go back here and search for dismiss. Okay, here's where we dismiss ourselves in our close, and we just said dismiss, but we really should have said presenting view controller dismiss. Got that? Okay, so the model of this guy right here. Okay, what is the model? Well, it's a document info view controller. It looks at a document's info, like its size and created. So its var should probably be a document that it inspects. And we'll make that be an emoji art document. Okay, so when we set this model, we want to update our UI. Put the size in there, put the created in there. So I'm going to put a little did set in here. And the did set is just going to call some update UI method that I'm going to have to write. And similarly, when view did load happens, I'm also going to update my UI. Because here I might be updating my UI before my outlets are set. For example, someone might be preparing me. Okay, so here I want to make sure that after my outlets are set, which is what view did load is all about, that I go back and update my UI again. So I need a private func here called update UI. And in here we're going to update all the fields, all our outlets and stuff like that to match our model, which is this document up here. All right, so what do we need to do this? One thing we need to do is to obviously be able to get the URL for the document and then go look at the URL to find its file attribute. So I'm going to show you how to do that with File Manager. It's very, very easy. I'm also going to protect against my outlets not being set yet, okay? Because that's often true in an update UI method because people set your model and prepare, and so your things aren't set. So I'm going to first check to see that my size label does not equal nil, and also that my created label does not equal nil. And if both of those are true, then I'm going to see if I can let URL equal the document's file URL, okay? Because I got to have that URL if I'm going to find the size and the created. And then I'm going to see if I can get those attributes, okay? So I'm going to say if I can let the attributes equal try to get the file manager, the default, not manager, the default one, to get the attributes of item. You see the very first one there, attributes of item. And of course, this is the URL's path right here. And if I'm able to do that, okay, if I can get the attributes, then I can update those labels. Okay, make sense? All right, so let's do that. I have the attributes here, presumably if I got this far with all these if-lets and stuff right here. So let's do the size label. That one's an easy one. Size label.text, text equals, let's just put the attributes. Okay, now attributes that come back from attributes of item, this attributes is a dictionary. If we look at it right here, it's a dictionary of file attribute keys and any. So you can go look in the documentation for all the file attributes that you can get. And there's quite a few, created date, modified date, size, all these things. So we're going to use one of them here, which is .size. And if that happens to be nil, for some reason we can't get the size, which we should always be able to, but if we can't, then I'm going to go ahead and say 0 bytes. Although maybe I'd be better off saying something like unknown size or something like that here, but I'll just say that for demo purposes. And then we got created. So here I'm going to say, I'm going to try and get the creation date by saying if I can let created equal the attributes for the creation date. Okay, that's another file attribute key right there. And this comes back as an any, so I want to say as a date. Okay, so converting it to a date. Hopefully you're getting used to doing this as business to cast things from any. So here I've got the created, and what I really want to say is like my created labels text essentially equals this created, but unfortunately this is a date, and I have to turn it into a string to put it into text right here. So how do you turn a date into a string? Well, yes, you can do / open parentheses the date, and you'll get some sort of date. But really, we want to use a class in iOS called date formatter. Okay, so date formatter will format the date not just to look how you tell it to look, but also for the local language. Because some people, they put the month before the day or the day before the month. And of course, in other languages, the dates are all completely different. So I'm going to create a little date formatter here. I'm going to call it to be a let even, a short date formatter. So this is going to be a formatter that makes the date as short as possible. So it's going to be of type date formatter. And I'm going to create it by setting it equal to executing a closure. Hopefully you're all familiar with that. And I'll just create a formatter here by saying date formatter. And then I'm going to configure it a little. I'm going to tell it that I want it to use for its date style, I want it to use the short style, and also for its time style, I also want it to do short. And then I'm going to return this formatter. You know, if you're really doing an app, you might actually want this to be a more friendly naming that you'd have to do yourself, and it can actually be quite a bit of work to really get it right in all languages, but you might want to say like yesterday at 5 p.m. Okay, that would be nice. Unfortunately, there's no date formatter that's friendly format. You'd have to do that yourself. So I have my created here, so I'm just going to use my short date formatter, and date formatter has a method called string from date, and it'll convert it to a string for me. Okay, so that's the label and the UI. What about our thumbnail right there? I'm going to do the same protection here and say that if my thumbnail image view is not nil, not equal nil, then also if I can get my thumbnail from my document, remember that we have this var in emoji art document called thumbnail, right? This is our model up here, emoji art document. So we have this thumbnail. So I can get the thumbnail, and my thumbnail image view is not nil. Then I can just say my thumbnail image view dot image equals that thumbnail. Okay? So now we've taught this MVC how to take its model and keep its UI up to date with it. Now all we have to do is prepare this MVC as part of that modal segue. So you're all familiar how to do prepare. I'm going to put my navigation code right at the top here, which you wouldn't normally do, but just to make it so it's easy for us to find it as we go through this demo. So I'm going to put my navigation here. I'm just going to do prepare for segue. Here it is. Nothing special in this. I'm just going to say if my segue's identifier equals the show document info. Remember, that's what I set as my segue's identifier in the storyboard. Then I'm going to say if I can let the destination equal my segue's destination. And I'm also going to say .contents because I want it to work even if it's wrapped in a navigation controller. Remember that trick that we do? And here I'm going to say as, of course, a document info view controller, because that's what it should be. The segue show document info should be segueing to this thing right here. Then we can set our destination document equal to our document. And you know what? I'm also going to update my thumbnail here. So I'm just going to have my document's thumbnail updated to be my emoji art views snapshot. Okay, just because I might not have made a snapshot of my thumbnail since the last time I closed or whatever, I want it to be as up to date as possible. So that's it. We prepared it. It's a proper MVC with a model and all that, so this should all work. Let's take a look. Okay, here we are. So Applebee's right here. Here it is. Let's inspect it. Woohoo! Looking good. There's our thumbnail. The size is not 99, so it must have got that. It looks like we created this last week sometime. So that all looks good. We can return to document. But there's a little bit of a problem here. Let's go look at Space Dog. Okay, we got Space Dog right here. Let's inspect that. Ooh, Space Dog got smooshed, okay, because we have this fixed aspect ratio in our storyboard. And we don't want that. We want the aspect ratio of this to be equal to the aspect ratio of the image. Okay? Now, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do something very similar to what we did when we had the size hooked up, but unfortunately it's a little more difficult with aspect ratio. So I'm going to go over here to our storyboard, okay, and I'm going to bring up my document outline, and I'm going to bring up my MVC over here, and I'm going to create an outlet to this thumbnail image views constraint, which is the aspect ratio here that we put, so that I can control it, but I'm going to have to control it a little differently. So this is an outlet. I'm going to call it my thumbnail aspect ratio. Okay, there it is. When we did the size and width, if you'll remember, we just took the constraint and we set its constant to be different, right? That doesn't work for an aspect ratio, because aspect ratio is a multiplier. If we go look at aspect ratio in the inspector over here, okay, so I'm going to select aspect ratio. Here's the constraint in the inspector. You'll see that its constant is actually 0, and it's its multiplier that is causing the aspect ratio. And in fact, an aspect ratio constraint is nothing more than a relationship between a view's width and its height using this multiplier. Okay, it's not a special constraint. It's just a normal constraint that uses this multiplier to relate the width and height of a view. The problem here is that multiplier is read-only. Okay, it's not like constant where you can set it and things will adjust to it. Unfortunately, it's read-only. So if we want to change this, we have to change the entire constraint. We have to create a new constraint with that multiplier and replace it. So this is a great opportunity to show you how to set constraints on views and how to remove constraints on views and how to create constraints with initializer, all in one nice little example here. So that's what we're going to do. Let's go back to here. Go back to our document info here. Okay, I just added this aspect ratio right here. And in here where I set the thumbnail, I want this aspect ratio to be replaced with one that is correct for this thumbnail. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the existing one. So I'm going to ask my thumbnail image view to remove the constraint on itself, which is the thumbnail aspect ratio. Okay, that's the one from the storyboard. So remove the one from the storyboard. I better also check to make sure that that is not nil. Oops, not equal nil. Okay, just because I don't want to crash inside here. So that's good. So that's the first step, remove the constraint. Now let's create a new constraint with the right aspect ratio. So this is how you create a constraint in code. There's actually two ways. You can use this initializer. Believe it or not, there's another way where you can specify it using kind of ASCII art, okay, where you make these ASCII strings that have some rules and you almost make it look like your constraints are kind of artistically presented. I'm not going to show that. It's really cool, but I don't have time to show it, but it's something worth looking at in the documentation, where you can do things like pin things to the edges, make things centered, have things have relationships to other boundaries, all using this really concise ASCII art. But here we're going to use the constructor to create a new thumbnail aspect ratio. And the constructor looks like this. So it's NSLayout constraint. That's the class of a constraint. And here is its constructor right here, this first one. Okay, it's got so many arguments, I'm going to do my trick here so you can see them all clearly. And these all line up. You probably already are starting to recognize them as you look at this. Okay, these are all perfectly lined up with, back here in the storyboard, when we selected this and inspected it, look, see these things? First item, relation, second item, constant priority multiplier. Those are exactly the same things we are seeing over here when we are creating one. Okay, item, second item, relationships, multiplier, same things. Okay, so we're just setting them in code here. Now remember I said that this aspect ratio is a relationship between the thumbnail image view's width and its height. Right? So the two items involved are both the thumbnail image view. Okay? So that's that one and the two item thumbnail image view. But the attribute of the first one here is the width, and we're setting it actually to be equal to the height with this multiplier. Okay, so it's equal is the relationship between the two, but the multiplier gets to count in there. And of course that's related to the height. And then here's the multiplier we want, which is just the thumbnail's size.width divided by the thumbnail's size.height. Okay? And the constant, as you remember from the inspector and storyboard, is 0. We're not doing any constant manipulation of it, just this multiplier between the width and height. So this is what it looks like to create a layout constraint. And of course, these don't have to be the same view. They could be a relationship between two views. We could make their widths the same or whatever. Okay? So now that we've created this new constraint, let's add it to the thumbnail image view as a constraint. You add a constraint with add constraint. Okay? Okay, and that's it. So let's go take a look, see if that fixed our problem. Okay, here we go. Let's go space dog again, because it was the one that had the problem, and we inspect. And woo, space dog is the right, it's still width is limited, okay, but it got the right aspect ratio. And it's got the size there, 661 and all that. Okay? Now, one other thing I wanted you to notice here is this big white space doesn't look that good on iPad. So let's go do what I said over here and use the presentation style here. Where is the thing here? Let's go here. To do that, I will zoom out for you. Okay, let's go select this segue and go over here and change it to be presentation style form sheet. Okay, and this is what it's kind of going to look like. One thing that's cool about the storyboard is it will preview a lot of stuff that you pick. So it's going to be a little better here because a little less white space going on. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so here we go, space dog here, inspect. Okay, that looks a little nicer. It's still not awesome. It'd probably be better in a popover, which we're going to do next, but it's a little nicer. Note that I can't click on the background like a popover to get out of here. I still need return to document. And also, while we're here, let's take a look what this looks like on an iPhone. Okay, because an iPhone we can't do form sheet, but I promised you that iOS would automatically adapt, and it will. So here we go. Bring up space dog here, Here it is, inspect, and you can see it adapted by doing full screen instead. Okay. All right, let's get back to our slides and talk about Popover. Okay, so Popover is really just another way of doing modal. Okay, it just looks quite different, and it has more configuration to it. Okay, that's really all that's going on with Popover. So here's a Popover happening right here. You can see it's got this search for appointment MVC that's appearing there. And that's an entirely different MVC, and it is actually being shown modally, because you can't do anything else on this screen right now except for interact with that MVC. But you can see that the rest of the UI is just kind of grayed out, so it doesn't cover it all up, it just grays it out here. Notice that the Popover has a little arrow at the top, a little triangle. That thing is pointing to what caused this Popover to come up, okay? The thing that segued, that caused the segue to happen there. That often is a bar button item or a button item, but it also can be any arbitrary rectangle in any view. And why would you want that? Okay, let's say you have a text editor, you select a word, and you do some UI that says, show me the dictionary definition of this. And you pop that up in a Popover. Well, you would want that Popover's arrow to point at the word, right? So you need to be able to have arbitrary rectangles. Okay? Now, notice that the grayed area in the background, while you can't interact with it, you can touch on it. And when you do, that dismisses the Popover. So Popovers do not have cancel buttons. Okay? They don't need cancel buttons because you can always just click on the background to cancel them. Okay, that's why we went to be very careful with the alerts and action sheets to say which of our action items were cancel buttons, basically, so that it would know not to put them when it put it in a view controller like this. Okay? All right, so like I said, Popover is just same as modal. Okay? You create it the same way as well. You control drag, okay, to hook it up there. It's just that when you connect it, you say Popover instead of present modally. There's things you need to do, or might want to do, when you prepare a Popover, however. Okay? So the Popover has that little arrow. You might want to make it point in the right direction. You might want to make it point at a little rectangle in a view. You've got to say where that is. You might want to control how it adapts on iPhone, because it does adapt. Because normally you don't have Popovers on iPhones, but you still want to have single code, like we showed with the alert and action sheet, that does the Popover stuff, and it just adapts and does full screen on the iPhone. So you can control that with the Popover. And the way you do all this is through a mechanism that's built into iOS called presentation controllers. So all segues are managed by what's called a presentation controller, which I'm not going to talk about at all. However, Popover's controller, which is called UI Popover Presentation Controller, is the place you want to reach into when you're preparing to do these things. Set the triangle, the little arrow where it points, do anything with the adapting mechanism, etc. So let's look what that looks like. So here's a prepare for segue for a Popover. And everything's the same on the green code all the way until the yellow line of code. That's where things get different. And here what I'm doing is I'm asking the view controller that I'm presenting for its Popover presentation controller. This will be nil if this is not a Popover presentation. But if it is a Popover presentation, then I can configure the Popover. For example, saying the permitted arrow directions, or saying which rectangle in the text I want, or, as you can see down here, setting its delegate. Okay? So setting the delegate is how we control adapting behavior. Okay? How iOS adapts to trying to present a Popover on an iPhone. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about adapting and how that works here. And it's really great because you can then write your code to just work with Popovers, and it just automatically work on iPhone. You don't have to put a lot of if device idiom is iPad, then do this. Okay? So it's really nice for that. So what happens here is that when the Popover is presented in a horizontally compact environment, you all know which one of those are, that's an iPhone basically, in either landscape or portrait, iPhone Plus in portrait. In that kind of environment, it adapts by switching from Popover to full screen. But you can stop that if you want by setting the delegate like I showed on the previous slide, and then implementing this delegate method called adaptive presentation style for controller trait collection. And it's essentially asking the delegate, I'm about to present this thing with this trait collection, like horizontally compact, right? And what modal presentation style would you like me to do? By default, I'll do popover on iPad or on non-horizontally compact places, and then I'll do full screen, not over full screen, full screen on horizontally compact. That's the default. Well, you can intercede here and say, no, no, no. I want you to adapt to none. In other words, don't adapt. Okay, when I say return UI modal presentation style none, it says do not adapt in any place. That means put it as a popover on the iPhone. Okay, so this is how you can make it not adapt and thus use a popover on an iPhone, which you sometimes want if the popover is kind of small and will fit nicely. You would want this. Okay, as an alternative to this, okay, let's say the popover is big and it won't fit, then you can use this delegate method. And what this delegate method does is allow you to return a different MVC to show on iPhone. Now, why would you want to return a different MVC? It's not because you want a different content MVC. I still want my document info view controller. I still want it to be in there, but maybe I want to wrap it in a navigation controller so I can put a cancel button on the top. Because when it comes up full screen, I have to be able to cancel it, unlike in popover. You see the difference? So I can have exactly the same view controller, my document info view controller, and here from this method, view controller for adaptive presentation style, I'm going to return a navigation controller whose root view controller is my document view controller. And I've added a cancel button to it. Make sense? Okay, so this is a way to go ahead and let it adapt on iPhone, but get involved a little bit and control how the MVC is presented. Okay, another important popover issue is its size. Okay, by default, the popover is going to come up at a kind of a fixed size. It's about the width of an iPhone to maybe 2/3 the height of most screens, but it's almost never what you want. Okay, you want the popover to come up and be as small as possible, right, to fit your UI. And so you do that with this var in your view controller, the one that's being presented, called preferred content size. And it just returns the size that this view controller likes to be, okay, the size it wants to be in a popover. And I'm going to show you in the demo here how we can calculate that minimum size using auto layout, because that's really what we want to do. We want to fit the stuff that's in our UI using auto layout, okay? So this is a very important var to either set or override one or the other. All right, so let's do that. Let's go ahead and make a nice little popover version. What I'm going to do here is go back to Emoji Art and do the exact same thing that we did before, okay, with this little info button that appears, over here. But I'm going to add another button that does the same thing, same MVC, but in a popover. So you can see them side by side, okay? And I'm going to use the exact same MVC to do that. They're going to completely share the code. All right, so how do we do this? Really easily, I'm going to go get another bar button item, put it up here next to the inspect. We'll call this one inspect, we'll call it pop, okay, because it's going to pop over. And I'm just going to control drag from it to this exact same MVC right here. And instead of present modally, I'm going to do present as popover. Okay, and here you can see I can inspect this segue. Here's the old segue, show document info. Here's the new one. You know what? This popover, since I can tell whether it's a popover and prepare, I'm going to have the exact same identifier, show document info. It's going to do the same preparation. We'll just put a little bit extra in there if we need to control something that's popover. And look, even some of these things, like which arrow direction is allowed and things like that, can be set right here in the storyboards. You don't even need to do it in your prepare. But the delegate stuff for adapting, that we will need to do, and that I am going to show you. Okay? So that's it, actually. That's all we need to do. We already have a fully functioning MVC. You can already see it's not going to be very pretty. Look how big this popover is going to be. That's not going to be nice. But let's go take a look. Let's go run it on iPad, see what we get. All right, we got our Applebee's right here. Okay, here's our old inspector, right? Looking good. And here's our popover. Not looking great, but not looking that bad. At least it's working, but we don't want it to be this big, okay? We want it to be just big enough to fit all of this stuff. All right, so to do that, we obviously need the preferred content, set the preferred content size, so let's do that. Let's go to our document info controller and have it essentially set its own preferred content size. Now, where's a good place to set one's own content size, one good place is in view did layout subviews, because remember that view did layout subviews is a place where we're sure that geometry will work, right? This is where I encourage you to put all your geometry specific code. So this is a pretty good place to put it here. Our preferred size probably doesn't actually depend on our geometry very much, okay, because we're just going to do auto layout on our stack views and see how they fit. But it can't hurt to put stuff in here. It's as good a place as any, probably. Now, how am I going to calculate my preferred size? Well, I'm actually going to go back to my storyboard here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this top level stack view right here. See this top level? And I'm going to ask iOS, and I'm going to show you how to do that. What's the smallest you can be and still fit all these things? Okay, and still obey all the constraints. So that's what I'm going to do. So to do that, I actually need an outlet to this top level view. So let's go ahead and create that outlet. We'll just go down to our outlets all are here. Let's control drag. Call this our top level view. Okay, so here's our top level view. And all I'm going to do here, let's make full code size here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this really great UI view method called size that fits in size. Okay, so this is a method that you give it a size and it'll tell you what size best fits in that size. And then there are two really cool sizes. One is as small as possible, and the other one is as big as possible, okay? Those are the two sizes that you can give it. So I'm going to use the as small as possible size to do this. So here's how it works. I'm going to say if I can let the fitted size equal my top level view, okay, that top level stack view thing, size that fits, and the size that fits, and the smallest possible size is UI layout, whoa. Okay, there. UI layout fitting size, and you can see here there are the two magic ones, expanded size and compressed size. So compressed size is the one I want. Okay, and this is essentially saying go do auto layout and see the smallest possible size that you can be. So if I'm able to do that, which I'll be able to do if this is not nil, if my outlet has been set here, then I'm going to set my preferred content size equal to a CG size, which is width of that fitted size, plus a little bit of padding. You know, I want a little border. I don't want my popover to be jammed right up against my UI element, so I want a little extra. And of course, this should be a constant, but it's a demo, so we won't do that. So here's the height is the fitted size.height plus some padding as well. So I just want to make a nice size. So this is a size that I prefer to be, that I feel like I will look nice if I'm that size. So let's see what happens when we run that. Okay, here again. Ready? Okay, so here's our normal one, right? And now the popover one. Woohoo! Okay, it looks really, really good. It's very nice, much nicer than the one that does the whole document. But and in fact, let's go look. Okay, this is a popover, looks great. Let's go make it look, see how it looks on the iPhone, just real quick. Make sure it's doing adapting. I told you that in horizontally compact, it's going to adapt. So let's make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. So here we go, Applebee's. Here's our Applebee's. Let's go popover. Woohoo! Still worked. Looks nice. Okay, didn't break anything that we changed the preferred size or anything like that. It's still working just great. But we do have a little bit of a problem here. Okay, all is not perfectly awesome in the world here, which is, let's take a look at this on iPad again. And we're going to see that it actually, while it looks pretty, it's not really very sensible. Because why do I have a thumbnail image when I can see the image right there? Okay, it doesn't really make sense to have a thumbnail image here. It made sense in this case over here, right? It makes sense here because I'm blocking the image, and so I want to remind myself which one this is. But here, it doesn't make sense to have there, so we shouldn't have that here. Also, return to document. Okay, yeah, but how about just click over here? So I don't need return to document. That's essentially a cancel button for this thing, so I don't need that as well. And finally, I don't know if you're able to see this with the screen resolution, but you see my triangle right up there? It's actually a little bit see-through. It's kind of blurring the background. But then I have a stark, hard white background here. I don't want that. I want to get rid of my hard white background and have the whole thing be a little bit see-through. It's a little softer, it looks a little nicer, it's less harsh to do that. So this background of this view controller really should not be white. It should be clear and let the blur of the pop-up show behind. So I want to make these changes in my document view controller here. So I'm going to do these at the end of update UI. I'm just going to say here, if my presentation controller, that's the presentation controller, that's the controller that brought me up. If it is a UI popover presentation controller, then I'm going to do some popover specific stuff here. Like I'm going to have the thumbnail image view is hidden equals true. I'm going to hide that image. I don't want that. And also I'm going to hide that return button. So let's go back to our storyboard here and make yet another outlet. Okay, this outlet is going to be to this return to document button right here. Control drag. I'm going to call that my return to document button. Okay, back here. All right, so I'm going to have that return to document button. It is hidden, also true. And let's fix that background. I'm going to have my view's background color equal clear. Okay, so I get that nice popover blur effect behind right there. All right, let's see if that fixed everything. That sure seemed simple. And this is kind of the wonder of auto layout, is that we just hide those things and then the rest of the stuff is just going to, form up around it and use the auto layout. So here we go. Pop. Woohoo! Look at that. Okay, it's not, I don't know if you can see the blur right there behind. Okay, so the apple, if I change that to the B, you'll see it's a little yellow there. So this is nice, and also it's using very little space, and also giving me the information I need without any stuff I don't need, like the return to document button. Well, let's go see what happened on the iPhone when we did that, though. Sometimes you got to pay when you make a change. Okay, here we go. All right, and pop. Whoa. Oh, that's not good. Okay, well, what's happening here? Why is this completely black? It's about the worst possible thing that can happen, especially on the iPhone 10, because the whole screen is black, the whole thing looks black. Okay, so why did this happen? Well, we changed the background color of that view controller to be clear. So we are actually looking into the void here, okay? Be careful not to get too close to our device. It might suck us in there because this is absolute void. There's nothing behind there. So that's not good, okay? So we've kind of changed our popover. Now, we could go and do the adapting thing where we fix that view controller up before it presents, but I'm going to do something else. I'm going to fix the adapting so that it shows a popover on iPhone, because now that I've made that popover nice and small, it'll fit beautifully on iPhone. So let's go fix that. Let's make this adapt so that on iPhone, it still shows popover. So I'm going to do that by going back here. Okay, this is my prepare right here. This is where I prepare for both my segues, both the Popover segue and the other segue. So here, when I'm doing my prepare, I just need to grab my Popover presentation controller and set myself as its delegate so I can get involved in the adaptation. So I'm going to say if I can let my Popover presentation controller equal the destination view controllers Popover presentation controller. And again, this will be nil if we're not popover, so it's not going to affect the modal one we have. This is just no effect. This if let won't happen. Then I'm going to set the Popover controller's delegate equal to myself. And of course, as soon as I do that, now I need to say, oh yes, I'm a UI Popover presentation controller delegate. All the methods in there are optional, so I successfully implement that protocol. But I am going to pick one to implement, which is the one we talked about in the slides, which is the adaptive presentation style for controller trait collection. Let's make so you can see it again right here. Okay, so this again, this is going to be a Popover presentation controller. It's saying in a given trait collection, horizontally compact, for example, whatever, what modal presentation style do you want me to use? And the default is for compact width, full screen. That's the default. So I'm going to say no. I want you to do none. Okay, presentation style none, which means don't adapt. Okay, The adaptation style is none. There is no adaptation style because I don't want you to adapt. And that's going to cause it to just continue to use Popover as its presentation style. So let's go look, see if that fixed it on the iPhone. There we go. And pop. Woohoo! All fixed. Okay, and this looks nice even in landscape mode. Okay. And none of this broke this inspector. Even though it's using the exact same code, it's because there's no Popover presentation controller involved there, so none of that code had any effect. All right. Okay, that's it. Let's get back to our slides here. Okay, the next segue we're going to talk about is Unwind, the Unwind Segue. This is the only segue in iOS that does not create a new MVC. I just want to remind you that all the segues we talked about before, they always create a new MVC. Even show detail in split view controller replaces the detail with a new MVC. Okay? And certainly all the other navigation pushing on the stack, modally obviously creates one and puts it up, but Unwind does not. Okay? It's the only one that does that. And that's because where Unwind segues to is segues to an existing view controller that presented the current view controller, or indirectly presented it by presenting some other view controller that presented this one. Okay? So what's this thing good for? Well, two things really. One, it's good for jumping back more than one step in a navigation controller. Okay? So you got a navigation controller, you've pushed a bunch of cards on the stack, now you want to go back 3 or 4 cards in one jump. Okay? This is good for that. Another thing that it's really good for, or the other thing it's really good for, is what we talked about in the first slides today, which is communicating back to its presenting view controller. Okay? Because by segueing back to its presenting view controller versus just dismissing itself, it's giving that presenting view controller a chance to interact with it. Okay? All right, so how does this whole thing work? Instead of control dragging to create this MVC by control dragging to the MVC you want to go back to, instead you're going to control drag to this little red button at the top of the MVC. You've probably seen this before, this little red button. You probably wonder, what the heck is that thing? And when you connect to that, you're going to get some choices. Okay? These choices are going to be a list of special methods that Xcode has found in your entire app. So it looks in your entire app and looks for these special methods, and it lists them all here. Okay? And we're going to talk about what makes that special and how you specify this special thing. Okay? So that's how you set up an Unwind Segue. Okay? So how does it do what it does from there? Control dragging to there and choosing a method there means go segue to some MVC that presented me, or that presented someone who presented me, or all the way up this chain, who implements that method. So iOS is going to look at every single person, every single MVC that presented you until it finds one that implements the method you chose when you control drag to that exit. If it doesn't find one, it won't segue. Okay? And that's it. That's how Unwind Segue works. So let's look at the methods involved here. Here's the special method that it looks for to put in that menu. It has to have two things about it. One, @IB_action. If you don't put @IB_action in front of it, it won't work. It won't appear in the list of the little exit button. And number two, it has to have one and only one argument, which has to be of type UI Storyboard Segue. So UI Storyboard Segue is the exact same type as the first argument to prepare for Segue. Okay? And it has the destination view controller. It also has the source view controller in an unwind case. Okay? So it knows where you're unwinding from, that's the source, and where you're unwinding to, that's the destination. Okay? So that's the only argument. So if you create that method, it will, in any VC, anywhere in your app, it will show up in the exit menu there. Okay? Now, let's talk about these two methods and the code there. You do get to prepare for an Unwind Segue. Okay? You do actually get prepare for Segue called for you, and you would be maybe thinking that you would want to get the destination like you usually do and call it to public API, but I actually recommend against this. And why is that? Because MVCs that you present are essentially part of your view, and you don't really want to know about them by name. Okay, which you have to have here because you have to say destination as some MVC. Okay, So I kind of recommend against this. A little bit violates MVC. So how do you have the unwinding segue talk to the MVC that presented it? Well, what you do is you have the one that presented it talk to it, okay? And you can do that through that special method, okay? Here's the special method, go back, takes the segue as the argument, has IB action, and in here, I'm looking at the source segue, which is where we're unwinding from, and getting something out of its public API. So in the case of the contacts example, this would be asking the add contact MVC, okay, what contact did you get? Okay, which perfectly obeys MVC, because when you present something, you're certainly allowed to talk to what you present. Okay, so that's how it works. Notice that when the unwind happens, the presented one gets dismissed, and will presumably leave the heap, okay, after this special method finishes. All right, so let's go look at a demo of that. What are we going to do for this? I'm going to add a close document button to our inspector. So, right, so we're inspecting the document, and what if I just want to close it right away? Right now I have to return the document and then hit done. But it'd be cool if I could just, in the inspector, say, close this document. Go right back to the document chooser. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go to my storyboard right here, and I'm just going to, just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm doing here, I'm taking a button, I'm going to put it right in here. This button is going to be called Close Document. Okay, I'm going to make it red so it's clear that it's kind of somewhat destructive to doing this. And what I want this button to do is close the document. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to do it with unwind. So that means I want to control drag up to this little exit button up here. But if I control drag to it now, in fact, let's do it, you'll see that there's no choices. Look, control drag, and it won't even let me do it because there's nothing there. That's because I haven't created any of these special methods anywhere. So let's go over to our emoji art view controller and create one of those special methods here. I'm going to call it @IB action. Got to have that piece of it. Okay, I'm going to call it close by segue is what it's going to be called, and it's got to have UI storyboard segue as its only argument right here. Okay, this is the special method, and it's a func. And what I'm going to do inside here is close. Okay, close myself. Now, I could do other things in here. I could get the this by segue dot source is the MVC that I'm unwinding from. I could go talk to it, whatever. I don't need to here because I'm just going to close to make this quick. And of course, close is this method down here. Okay, it takes a bar button item as the argument. I'm going to do the trick of making that optional and having it default to nil. That way, I can say close open parentheses, close parentheses, and this will work. Now that I've created this special method, now if I go back to my storyboard and control drag from this document button, whoop, up to here, woohoo, there it is, close by segue. Notice it kind of mangles the name a little bit, but there it is, close by segue. I'm going to click it, okay, and now when I click close button, it's going to search up the people who presented me looking for that. In this case, it's going to find something because, of course, our emoji art document is the one that presents this inspector. Okay, so here we go. We got Applebee's, right? So right now, if we wanted to close the document right here, we'd have to click back here, then click done, okay, bring it back. But now we can just say, close this document, okay? And it unwound to the emoji view controller, which closed itself. Okay, same thing working here, right? Unwind. And notice that the unwind works both from popovers, and it also works from modal presentation. All right? Okay, that's it for unwind. It's a really easy one. Let's go back to our slides. Oops. Oh, about that. Okay. All right. The last segue we're going to talk about is embed segue. All right. So an embed segue is really cool segue. It allows you to take the self.view, the top level view in a view controller, and put it inside the view hierarchy of another view controller. Okay, so it's essentially embedding one view controller inside another, okay, which is really a powerful encapsulation technique to be able to do that. Because you could have a very complicated view inside your view controller completely controlled by a full view controller suite, right? It has a model, it knows how to update its UI, it has outlets, everything is all over there controlling this view that's embedded in another view controller's view hierarchy. Okay, so super powerful. Xcode makes this super easy to do. You just go down to your utilities window, same place you drag out a button or whatever, you drag out what's called a container view. So just search for container and you'll find it. You drag that out, and when you do, it's going to automatically create this embed segue. You see how it's made the little S-shaped segue right there, and to another view controller. And then you can do whatever you want in that view controller. Set its identity to whatever, put UI in there, hook up outlets to whatever. It's completely its own view controller. Okay? Now, it works just like other segues in that you get to prepare for it, right? So you're going to get prepare for segue, and you can set the segue identifier right there. However, one thing to consider about embed segues is the timing there. Just like other segues, the outlets of the thing that you're connecting to are not set. Okay? So you can't really update it there. So a lot of times when we segue to an embed segue, what we do in the prepare is we grab a hold of the embedded segue, okay, or embedded MVC. We grab a hold of that view controller so we can talk to it later, because we might need to update it or set something about its model or whatever as time goes on. So we actually usually have a var, and we grab onto it and we talk to it later. And that's what I'm going to do in our demo here. And after the demo, we're done for this week, and actually done for quite a while because we got Thanksgiving next week. But what we're going to do in this demo is I'm going to take the inspector stuff that we did, and I'm going to embed it as a little overlay in my emoji art document. So I'm going to be able to see the size and creation date of my document at all times. I won't have to click either of those buttons, pop or inspect, to do it. I'll just be able to always see it in the bottom. And now, to do that, of course, I'm going to have to update it every time my document saves, right? Because it shows the size of the document. And when it auto-saves, whoo, that's going to change. So I have to be able to change it. So I'm going to have to grab onto this embedded thing and update its model as my model changes, basically. All right, so let's hop back in here and do this. So what do we need to do this? Well, we're just going to grab that container view. Let's go do it. Container view. Here it is, right? And I'm going to drag it in here. Now, this is kind of difficult to drag where you want. I'm going to put it over. Well, let's scroll this over so you can see it better. It's a little hard to drag this in here because when I try and drop this, look, it's always trying to drop it in my drop zone or in the scroll view. See how it's saying drop zone, scroll view? It's trying to drop it in there, and there's just no way to drop it. I don't want it in either of those. I want it to be at the same level as all these other views, okay, and overlaying everything. So, all right, I'm going to give up and just drop it in here, okay? At least it put it in there, and you can see here is the little view controller that it created for me. So here's where I'm going to do all my, I'm going to basically do this stuff in here. But let's fix the fact that this got added, looks like, to my drop zone or something. And we're going to do that with the document outline. And I've kind of reminded you of this before. The document outline is a great place to fix problems like this. So you can see it actually added it as something, as a subview of my scroll view. Okay? But I want it to be up at the same level as the drop zone and the emoji collection view. So I'm just going to drag it out, stop being a subview there. And now drop zone, emoji, and container view are all at the same level. Now we need to do some constraints because I don't want this thing sitting in the middle here. I actually want it down in the bottom edge, so I'm going to go do that. I'm going to say constraints 0, 0, and I'm going to hope my nearest neighbor is the safe area. Let's hope. Okay, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. We'll see. Now it wants to know about width and height. Okay, this thing needs to know width and height. So I'm going to have my width and height set to the preferred content size of my view, of course, right? Same size that the popover is. But to do that, I'm going to have to set a width and height here and have outlets to them like we saw before. And look at that. It jumped, and it looks like it did do the safe area. Let's look. Yeah, safe area right there, and fixed width and height. Okay, well, of course, we don't want fixed width and height. We want to have outlets to these, so let's add outlets for these things. Put it right here. We'll control, drag, oops, not from there, from here. This is our embedded doc info height. And this one is our embedded doc info width. Okay, so we're going to have to set this width and height to be the preferred content size of our doc info. So let's go back to our view control, or to our storyboard here and do our UI. We've got this UI here. First of all, we have to set its identity to be a doc info view controller. This is the great thing about embedded, is we're going to get all the benefit of the code we wrote to do the size and the created by and all that stuff. We're going to get all that benefit here essentially for free. Now, here embedded, I don't need, obviously, this view, and I don't need close document or return document. So I'm going to do another kind of tricky thing, which I'm going to grab this whole stack view here, which is this one, I think. Yes. I'm going to drag this one here and copy it and paste it down here. Okay? Then I'm going to center it in the middle. Okay, so that it's centered. I'm going to, of course, wire up my outlets to it. So let's do that. Go over here, go down here to where our outlets are. Here they are. So let's zoom in a little so you can see better here. Okay, so here's our size label. Let's drag in there. Here's our created label right here. And our top level view is actually now this stack view. So let's do that one to top level view. Okay, so we've wired up our UI. All this other code is just going to work because we set this thing to be a doc info view controller. So now let's go back to our emoji art view controller, and we need to prepare it. So it's going to need its own identifier because we want a little bit different preparation for this embed one. So I'm going to click on this and inspect it. And the only thing I can inspect here is its identifier. So I'm going to call this my embed document info segue. Let's go back here, and now I'm going to say if my segue else if it is the embed document info segue. Then all I'm going to do here, if that segue, is I'm going to grab on to that document MVC. So I'm going to create a local var here, which I'm going to call a private var. I'm going to call it, where did I call it here? Called it my embedded document info, embedded doc info, we'll call it. And it's of type document info view controller. Okay, and so here I'm just going to say that my embedded doc info equals the segue's destination, contents probably, as a document info view controller. Because if it's not a document info controller, I don't even want to set this var. And then all I need to do is every time my document auto-saves, I need to update this thing. So let's go down here to where we know where auto-saving is. It's right here where we're observing. Okay, here's where we're observing the document state change. So every time the document state changes to normal, I'm going to update it. Because we know that when it auto-saves, it goes to progress available and then back to normal. It'll also work when I first open the document. So I'm just going to say here, if self document document state equals normal, then I'm going to let doc info vc equal my self.embedded doc info, embedded doc info. So if I got that, then I'm going to set my doc info vc's model to be myself. Okay, in case it's not already set there, this will also cause it to update. And then I'm also going to set the width and height of that embedded document based on those constraints. Right? So that was the self-embedded doc info width is doc constant equals the doc info VC's preferred content size dot width. And the same thing here, the self-embedded doc info height dot constant equals the doc info VC dot preferred constant dot height. Okay? Got crowds outside the door here, so let me show you this real quick. Okay, here we go. Applebee's, and there it is. Okay, now it doesn't quite look right. Okay, it got the size right, but it's got this white background. Also, watch this. If I move this apple down here, and then I try to pick the apple up, oh no, I can't pick it up. So even if it were clear, this would be a problem. So I need two things I need to fix. I don't want this white, and I want it not to grab any gestures. So let's look and see how we do that. We go to our storyboard right here. Okay, we're going to make it clear by just having this view controller right here have a clear background. Okay, so that's going to make it clear. And then we're going to make it not intercept gestures by clicking this button here off. See it says user interaction enabled in this embedded view? I'm going to turn that off. And that's going to make it so that it doesn't have any user interaction, so of course it won't grab any of the gesture stuff. There we go. Oh, look, it's clear. Okay, it's not going to, let's put an apple over there. Okay, I can pick the apple up, even if it's right on top of it. That's good. So that's all fixed. It works beautifully here on iPad. If we change something, which we did, we moved the apple, but let's add something that's going to change the size. So we'll go here, we'll put this in. We'll have to wait a little bit for it to autosave, and then hopefully this 718 bytes will change to something else before the hordes come in. There it is, 760 bytes. Okay? And also, last thing, it works on iPhone. This all works on iPhone as well, because the embed segue completely independent of the platform that it's on. Okay, there it is there. Also, this stuff is all still working. Okay, closed document, still work, space dog, popover, all still working. Okay, that's segues. Okay, so hope you'll be using segues all over in your final project. So good luck with that, and I will see you all in a couple of weeks.
For more, please visit us at stanford.edu.